still adding to the disorders that are related to this.
Yes, they are, and we'll get to the new ones here. We'll cover some of the others here real quick. Amyloidosis, a rare disease, fortunately, caused by when an abnormal protein, amyloid, enters the tissues or organs and basically eats them up. I mean, you're not long for this world if you got that, unfortunately.
But that would be a presumptive disorder.
It is a presumptive. We talked about diabetes mellitus. We've got Hodgkin's disease, which is a cancer characterized by progressive enlargement of the lymph nodes, the liver, and the spleen, and by progressive anemia, which is, lack of red blood cells, lack of energy, and so forth. And then we've got multiple myeloma, again, a rare form of cancer, a type of white blood cell in the bone marrow, and I've unfortunately run across several people with that, and you're only good for up to 5 years from the date you're diagnosed with that, so it's the nasty stuff. And we already said Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now we're going to talk about non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
There is a difference.
There's a difference, and that's a group of cancers that affect the lymph glands and other lymphatic tissues. So the difference is what part of the body system is it affecting. And then we'll go to, and I should have put an N here, we'll go into the end. Well, no, we got one other, and that's soft tissue sarcoma. There's a whole list of those. It's a type of cancer in the body tissue, such as muscle, fat, blood, and lymph vessels and connected tissues. It does, I have to point out, there's some more confusion here amongst the veteran population, and that's not melanoma. That's only things diagnosed as sarcoma. There's a couple different kinds of cancer processes, sarcoma and melanoma.
And since this gets pretty complicated and convoluted, if anybody in the listening area here on the Space Coast of Florida, folks, if you're listening in Alabama or Oregon or maybe even over in Afghanistan, you can always access avetproject.org and get direction on how to find out more about this. But for the folks here on the Space Coast, what's their best approach to finding out specifics on this list? How can they get in touch with you?
Best approach for this and every other type of claim for veterans' disability is to come to our office out in the Vieira government complex. It's out close to the courthouse out there. We're in Bravo building on the first floor. You can't miss it. Some of the people in other offices have helped us out immensely by putting all kinds of arrow signs up pointing to our office. So again, that's Bravo building out in the Vieira government complex, and you can reach us on the phone at 633-2012. Okay, get that pen ready. 633-2012.
So those soft tissue sarcomas, long list. It's enough to say that if you get some kind of crazy diagnosis like that, get a hold of Glenn.
Yeah, come see us.
Now, what about some of these others? Because there's some really nasty cancers and they're prevalent.
Some of these are a lot more prevalent. Some of the newer ones include prostate cancer, which is, pretty common in males above the age of 50 to start with, and more common, unfortunately, in those exposed to herbicides.
Right. The Agent Orange exposed veterans have a much higher incidence of prostate cancer than the general public.
Than their general population for the same age and everything.
Right. So that's an important one.
Respiratory cancers, which is the lung, the voice box, the trachea, your breathing tube, and the bronchus inside the lung. Of course, that's unfortunately all too common, especially amongst exposed veterans. And then we have, those are the brand new is ischemic heart disease, which simply is any kind of heart disease except a valvular heart disease. If your heart problem is due to a valve, and usually that results in some kind of valve replacement or something, other than that, it's pretty much any other kind of heart disease that deals with blockage and swelling of the heart and those kind of ancillary problems that come from the blockages and what have you. And,
also
as you can imagine, that's one of the more prevalent there is.
Right, excluding the hypertensive heart disease. Hypertension is not on the list.
Yes, it does not include hypertension.
Okay, so
which is high blood, fancy word for high blood pressure.
Right, so ischemic heart disease, if you've got a heart issue and you're a Vietnam vet, boots on the ground, and it's not revolved around a valvular issue, you should contact Glenn's office.
Absolutely. Well, even if you're unsure if it's a valvular issue or not, contact us. I don't want you self-diagnosing yourself out of a benefit that you've earned through service to our country. A lot of people do that, so I'm always reluctant without putting that rider in there to tell people these things, so that and they go, oh well, okay, so I've got a valvular heart disease, I shouldn't see you. Well, no, you should see us, and we'll give you a disability benefits questionnaire to take to your cardiologist and let them tell the world whether it qualifies or not.
Exactly, whether it's a well-grounded claim.
Exactly.
So we've made it through that list. I mean, there's the multiple myeloma. You went over the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Parkinson's disease, another one.
Yep, that's another brand new one, added at the same time as the ischemic heart disease. And of course, that's a progressive nervous disorder of the or a disorder of the nervous system that affects muscle movement. People are normally have shakes, you would call it, and inability, as it gets progressively worse, inability to walk and get around and hold things and so forth and so on. That's more common than the last one, which is chronic B-cell leukemias, although we've seen more than I would have ever predicted, which is a type of cancer that affects the white blood cells, and sometimes in street language that's called a hairy cell leukemia, because the cells under a microscope look like they've got hairs coming out of them.
Okay, so these are horrible diagnoses, folks. But if you are a Vietnam veteran with boots on the ground and you know somebody that is, you got to investigate this, particularly if they get one of these diagnoses. Those are the presumptive issues related to Agent Orange exposure. We have with us Sonny Hartwell, a Marine Vietnam veteran, and Jim Fazio, who is a masterful technician with his specific treatment modality in helping vets with their issues related to post-traumatic stress disorder. That's the other issue we want to talk about. Get the presumptives out of the way, because anybody, man, that's just like a rubber stamp. That's going to happen.
It's going to happen, and again, the percentage is just going to depend on how bad it is affecting you today.
Now, on the other side, there are issues that you have to well-ground, that you have to develop. And combat veterans experience, what are they calling it? The signature wound of today's warriors, these PTSD and TBI.
Right. Traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. Traumatic brain injury really is the one they're calling the signature injury for Iraqi and Afghanistan veterans of today. Those are the ones that have fought the war, protecting our freedoms, and
right,
making sure that happens somewhere else besides our backyard. So.
And the thing about it, in wars past, World War I, World War II, Korea, the guys that would come back off the battlefield would be diagnosed as having shell shock or combat fatigue, because the severe amount of exposure to traumatic events.
Exactly.
Well, it really became an issue after the Vietnam conflict.
Yeah, and post-traumatic stress disorder didn't really appear in the medical community as a valid diagnosis until the early 1980s. So you can see, relatively speaking, it's only been around about half as a diagnosis and a thing requiring treatment and mental health treatment for half the time since it's been back to the Vietnam War. So people got nothing for half the time.
Well, I first want to say hello to Sonny Hartwell. Sonny, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome.
And Jim, you're a master of what you do. We're going to get to this topic here in a moment, because we're coming towards the end of the top of the hour. We're going to take a little break here on American Warrior Radio, but when we come back, we're going to discuss the impact that the chronic stress, this severe stress of being in battlefield situations, in experiencing things outside the realm of normal human experience, and how it can negatively impact the people, not just in the short term, but in the very long term. Because when we come back, I'd like to hear a little bit about your experience in combat, Sonny, and then Jim, we'll fire it up and see what kind of treatment you have to offer, because you have some unique methods that you employ.
Yes, they do.
Excellent. Well, Glenn, again, it's important. We wanted to start the year off right. We're going to talk about the Vietnam vets, and we'll talk about some of the presumptives that are on the plate for the Persian Gulf and the post 9/11 vets.
Yeah, there's a list now already there, so it's
well,
more to come, folks.
Exactly, and we want you to continue listening to American Warrior Radio right here on WMEL, sponsored by AVET Project. As I mentioned, you have any questions, you can go to avetproject.org, avetproject.org, and find out more. Stay with us. We'll be right back on American Warrior Radio.